So I'm delighted, first of all, to welcome Joanna from Trend Bible. Joanna has presented to us a few times, and that's for very good reason, because she has some amazing things to share. If anyone's ever wondered why I dress so stylishly, a lot of that is down to the tips I get from, and this wallpaper apparently is bang on trend, or so I was told last year. It's probably out of trend now, but you know, you do what you can, don't you? But I'm not going to say any more, because Joanna is the expert, obviously. So I'll just hand over to you. Is that okay?
Wonderful. Thank you very much. I need to be able to share my screen, Terry. So I think you've put me a speaker. Let's see if I can figure out how to get my slides up.
So have you got the share screen button at the bottom?
No, yeah, there it is. 2 seconds. There we go. I've seemed to go between Zoom, Teams, like, you know, and you just kind of misplace where the buttons are constantly. I'm like, oh, seems all unfamiliar again. Hello, everybody. It's lovely to see you.
Sorry, just before you start, if anyone's got any questions, just put them in the chat, and then I'll invite you to ask them of Joanna at the end.
Wonderful. Well, I'm probably going to talk, I'm hoping to talk for sort of about 15, 20 minutes, and then if you've got any questions, please do ask. I certainly won't be able to cover all of the stuff I could have covered in that 20 minutes, but my plan is to tell you a little bit about Trend Bible, tell you a little bit about what trend forecasting actually is, because not everybody works with trends or uses trend forecasting. And then I want to talk you through at a very top line level a couple of trends. One of them is for 2022 and one of them is for 2023. Just to give you a flavour, we've got all sorts of people from all sorts of different businesses on the presentation today. So it's really important to give you something that hopefully will filter down and trickle into all of your industries. So as Terry said, my name is Joanna. I am the founder and managing director of Trend Bible. I set the business up in 2008, I think it was. And it's grown from being just me sitting in my spare bedroom, listening to the radio all day, into a team of 20 people in our head office in Newcastle, with trend scouts based all over the world who filter information into my core team in Newcastle. We are a futures agency, so we forecast future trends for retailers and brands. Some of our customers and people who use our products are on the presentation today. And retailers and brands need to be able to anticipate what we're going to want, what kind of products we're going to want in 2 years' time, sometimes 5 years' time. Sometimes people work about 5 years ahead. And companies need to be able to develop a strategy and a range of products that will help them succeed and help them flex to what the modern consumer will want. And whilst all of you will be very sort of conscious of change and thinking a lot about how much change has happened, and as Terry said, more changes to come, that is always the case. Like, as someone who works in the world of change, that's my job. And so whilst some change, like a pandemic, can be surprising, it's unsurprising that change is happening, because it's always happening. But what really matters is which change we pay attention to. So I'm going to talk you through a couple of slides just to sort of set the scene, really, and give you a couple of models that we use at Trend Bible. And if you've seen me present before, I always present this pyramid, because it's just such a clear way to describe how trends work and how influence spreads. So at the top of this pyramid, we've got a group of consumers that we call mavens. They're a tiny percentage of society. They only make up 2.5% of consumers. And they are the first people to take new risks, to change their attitudes, to change their behaviours. And so as a trend forecaster, you know, our job as a trend agency is to figure out where the mavens go next and what kind of things they're up to, and to be able to predict whether some of those behaviours or attitudes or activities have the capacity to trickle right down to mass market trends, because the companies that we work with are large corporate global retailers. They don't want to invest in a trend that is not going to sell huge volumes effectively. So we're always looking at the mavens. I think Terry, quite often, I've heard Terry describe himself as a maven many a time. I couldn't possibly vouch for whether that's accurate or not. You can all maybe make your own mind up about that. But then we've got the early adopters, which is the next group down. This is a slightly bigger chunk of the market, about 13%. Early adopters are kind of hungry for information. They're heavy consumers of new media. They're looking for new ideas and opinions. They're looking to be informed. So they will pick up on the things that the mavens are doing, and they are a really important cornerstone in a trend gaining momentum. Then we've got the bottom two groups. We've got early majority and late majority. They each make up about 36% of the market. And this is what I would call mass market. So if you want to invest in a trend and you want it to sell to the mainstream consumer, it has to be relevant for these two groups. And that means that they have to be interested in it, they have to like it, and it has to be the right time for them. And the right time for them, particularly with that late majority audience, means they need to have seen this out and about in the market. They need to have been consuming it on Instagram or in magazines. They need to have visited a friend or a relative's house who they trust and admire and see that person living that new lifestyle, or painting their wall a particular color. They have to have a lot more persuasion to be able to pick up on a trend. Whereas a maven will do something because they just can see that they want to change the way they do things. They don't need anybody else's encouragement or permission to go and take that risk, whatever that risk might be. So hopefully that just describes to you a little bit about how influence starts to happen. We look at different consumer groups and it trickles down through this process. And we, as trend forecasters, are obsessed with what mavens and early adopters do so that we can inform global brands about what the early majority and the late majority will do. This is a second model that I wanted to show you as well, because this is really important. This sort of Venn diagram, this intersection in the middle, is really where companies need to be. You need to stand for something as a brand. If you change all the time and you go with the trends too much, you will never get known for having a sort of core timeless quality, a reason why people will come back to you. And the companies that we work with truly understand this. They understand that they must have some timeless qualities, but they must not stand still. They use trends to ensure that they are timely. So they use trend information to understand where the consumer is moving, what is changing, and how that change might impact the product or the service that they offer as a brand. So really important to have those two elements there. If you will notice that some companies go too heavy on the brand, they don't move forward enough, they lose relevance with the audience. And then companies who go too much for the trend stuff and they don't have a reason to exist, they don't have that sort of core purpose that needs to sit there with consumers. It's about having both. So I've got a couple of trends that I wanted to show you today. This one is conscious living, and I wanted to show this one because it's going to dovetail really nicely into James's presentation when he talks you through the changes they've made at Mayborn. We've done lots of work with Mayborn over the last 8-9 years, something like that. And conscious living is, you could be forgiven for thinking that is just about sort of the environment, but actually what we're noticing is that it means so much more than that. So I'm just going to share a couple of slides for each one. As I say, it's very top line because I haven't got time to go into huge amounts of details for you here today, but hopefully you can all see that slide. So conscious living is a trend that, I mean, if you think about the fact that I'm showing you a trend here for 2022, if we are talking about environmental trends, we are not saying that an environmental trend will appear in 2022 and disappear in 2023. So what I would encourage you to remember is that there are things called megatrends. Megatrends are, in fact, trends is, I don't really like that word for describing megatrends because they're kind of topics. So things like inclusivity and diversity or the environmental crisis. These are topics that we will still be talking about in 15 years' time, but the way that we approach those topics is where the change is, and that's where the trends sit. So you've got your mega trends that sit across the top, your big topics, and beneath that you've got movement, you've got change happening. So it would be, if you say, oh well, we've done a sort of environmental trend, or we've looked at the environmental thing and we think we're done, sort of big tick, we're done. There's kind of no such thing because the change is constant within that topic. So what conscious living is about here is about this sort of mindset around sustainability and the fact that it's gained momentum. Obviously, it's in the press this week, isn't it, with the COP26 sort of conversations happening. So it's very heightened at the moment. But what we are noticing is there's a build towards a sustainability mindset that's starting to come down to that early majority. It's not there, by the way, yet. It's still at early adopter stage. So we are noticing, particularly for families, that they want to have this approach which is less based on convenience, which was definitely not the case 5-10 years ago. It was convenience first, environment second. And now what we're noticing amongst those mavens and early adopters is it's got to be good for me and my family and good for the planet. It's a sort of non-negotiable. So we have had these sort of new phrases that we have had come about, like eco-anxiety. You know, it's worth thinking about, does your customer have eco-anxiety? It can be so tempting just to think of your relationship between your product. You know, I call it thinking to the shelf. Have you just thought to the shelf about your product on the shelf, but you haven't thought about all of the other many mindsets that customer may have? And if they have eco-anxiety, what is it about your product that they're going to really struggle and wrestle with in order, you know, they might really want your product, but it's just not going to sit well with their ethics. So have a look at that phrase, have a think about that lens of eco-anxiety. If you had a customer that had a strand of that, what would that mean for the way that they use and understand your product? We've also started to reach this new stage whereby parents and families are tired of greenwashing, and they will call things out. And even to the point now that to say that packaging is biodegradable just doesn't cut it, because consumers know that things can only biodegrade with the right amount of oxygen levels, which they just won't get. So it's not okay anymore to say, oh, the packaging is biodegradable or the product is biodegradable. That's not enough. People expect companies to take more responsibility than that. And they expect themselves to take more responsibility than that too. So this idea that, you know, conscious living is about doing things for the greater good. And this is what's really starting to take hold now. The way that we live, the way we raise our children, the way that we educate children with eco-friendly habits and holistic well-being and kindness is all part of this conscious living. It's not just about the environment. And in fact, we've sort of got this new word that we call it's all-clusivity, which is actually just about everything to do with holistic well-being, consumers wanting to make sure that it's good for them, good for their family, that they know who made that product and that no harm was made in the making of that product, and that the product is good for the environment. So huge pressure on any of you that make products that get consumed. There's a big sort of responsibility there to take all of that on board. And I've just got a slide here to show you some examples of some of these things. I'll just get my notes up so I'll tell you the right products. But we have got, for example, you can see the Cuddle product there. This is an air purification baby crib. So this is the kind of product that we're starting to see come through now at that maven level. You can see the nappy, the diaper on the top there. That is a fully recyclable, washable product now, which you just couldn't get that, you know, sort of 5 years ago. That just wasn't possible to have something that was completely harm-free. And they actually have, there's another company as well that's nappies are really interesting because it's one of the things that from a family perspective, people do have eco-anxiety about. There's a company called Nappy Ever After, and they have a sort of green laundry service for re-wearable nappies for babies. The product on the left-hand side there is called the Breezy, which is in the baby's pushchair there. This is an air purification product. So if you think about in countries like China, where the air quality is a major problem, and we obviously have some of these problems coming our way as well, maybe not quite as extreme as in some Chinese city centres, but these air purification products that people are bringing into family life. So I just thought these would be interesting things just to show you. And also the bottom right-hand image actually of the baby there just shows that we're seeing rental and subscription as a huge step forward, especially for millennial consumers. So this stems from the fashion industry where people are renting and returning clothes. There's a huge, obviously, rise of people using platforms like Depop to sell products and fashion that they don't use anymore. For those of you based in and around Newcastle, there was a huge new vintage store opened last week, and there were queues down the street to get into this store. So that idea that using sort of consuming things that are passed on to you rather than brand new products is gaining real momentum. And we've got apps like Whirly, which is a toy subscription platform. So they are gaining momentum. They set up about 3 years ago. So you literally will get a package of toys for a baby aged 0 to 3 months. And then when you finish with those products, you just pack them back up, you send them back, and then you get the 3 to 6 month slot. And you can pick and select which toys you want, but you don't have to keep them. You don't have to store them. We're living in ever smaller homes. So we haven't got the space, and parents just do not want to have this stuff kicking around. They want to be able to make sure it gets returned. So it's this idea of get it, play with it, give it back and repeat. That's the philosophy here. We've even seen this with furniture. There's a furniture rental company called Feather, and they do 1, 3 and 12-month leases on furniture. So watch out for this and think about whether there's an opportunity there for your product to be something that gets leased and borrowed, and that this customer is very, very interested in doing that. As I say, it's probably just at the bottom of Maven level at the minute, but as we move into 2022, you will be surprised how quickly these things are picking up pace. The second trend I just want to whiz through here is for 2023, so a bit further out, but I wanted to sort of drop this into the presentation just to get you thinking that far ahead, if you don't already. And this one is called the Age of Emotion. And it is absolutely in the wake of some of the pandemic implications, really. There is a sort of, we're living in the wake of things like social distancing, travel limitations, being isolated at home. And of course, you know, I'm reading every day about this idea that there is a second pandemic happening, and that is the mental well-being pandemic that is starting to, you know, it's being described as the other pandemic now. It's such a huge thing. So this is that's the kind of background as to where this trend has come from. So 2023 we'll see individuals assessing their emotional and their physical status and get a better understanding of how those two are related. So their emotional well-being is something that will really come to the fore. So if you think about something like the healthy eating movement or the vegan movement, this is it's a trickle on from that. It's highly introspective. It's very much about how to make yourself the very best you can be. And there's now an inclusion of this idea of emotional well-being that is super, super important to consumers. I hate using that word consumers as well. It's a bad habit, but I'm trying not to use the word consumers because it just doesn't reflect the way that audiences and shoppers see themselves now. They hate the word consumer. They don't want to be consumers. It's become a very sort of dirty word in that respect. So I'll just show you again a couple of examples here. The central image of the store that you can see there, that beautiful sort of calming environment. We see there's a micro trend here called calm commerce, and we're seeing retail environments having to introduce this sense of calm. Again, it's post-pandemic. People don't want the chaos. They don't want the fear of being in too cluttered a space. They want, we know that this is a store in Spain called Consume, and the agency that designed this store for them said they were trying to foster a reassuring relationship with customers. So how interesting that reassuring. Yes, of course, it's about the sort of where that produce came from. You need to be able to communicate that stuff to audiences now, but it's also about creating this very calming environment where consumers are looking for those moments of calm and they're looking for soothing spaces. And we will see this domestic feel that we've all got so used to from spending more time at home. A lot of people have got used to that, not everybody, but most people have, especially office workers, got used to spending more time at home. So we'll see this domestic environment start to filter into offices and into work environments and into commerce. Another huge part of this is massive, but I don't want to sort of dumb it down, but this image on the right hand side here, this is a company called Neuro. This is a huge part of this trend, is neurotechnology, being able to sort of pre-program ourselves. So they actually produce what they call functional mints and gums that can stimulate certain states of mind, so certain mind states such as calm or focus or eliminating distractions or increase in focus and productivity. Probably the stuff that we're all talking about, oh, you know, I need to work at home to do deep thinking, or I need to go into the office to be socially around people. Well, how about if that wasn't an issue of the space that you're in, but it was actually an issue of how you kind of created the right state of mind for yourself. So we're seeing a much more holistic view of well-being, including grief and the sense of loss. So the image at the bottom there is Eternova, which is a company that's set up, which is all about reframing grief, reframing death. And of course, we're not just talking about grief and death in itself, we're talking about loss generally. People are experiencing a sense of loss. They have lost parts of the life they had before, for better and for worse, but people are processing their emotions around this concept of loss. And by the time we get to 2023, I know it sounds like a long way away, people will still be, because it isn't over yet, we're still living through a pandemic at the minute. So people will still be wanting to process the things that have happened, to reevaluate and look at their lives really there. So there's an idea of sort of destigmatizing grief and talking about grief and loss and evaluating loss that's important there. The image just quickly on the left-hand side there, that empathy echo chamber. We look at all sorts of things to pull our trends together. And this was actually something created from the Finland stand at the London Design Biennale in the summer. And this was a place they created. The idea was it's a shared space to practice empathy with others and reflect on experiences. So you go into this little chamber, and that was the purpose of that. Now that's a very sort of highbrow concept. My suggestion is not that this is going to turn up in every Tesco on every street corner, but isn't it interesting to see that as a concept? We often see things trickle through from art to design. Isn't it interesting to see that that was what they chose to put forward this year, a shared space to practice empathy with others, having been so disconnected from each other for such a long time. So I just want to give you some practical top tips, because there's some stuff in here that is really out there, and some stuff that's quite pragmatic. But my suggestions are, make sure that you're doing some future thinking activities inside your business. Are you thinking about the future? Do you take a day out each year to think about what might happen next year beyond the numbers of the business? What's going to happen? What's going to change for your customer beyond the product that they buy from you? Number two, break down the big topics. I mentioned about this idea of megatrends, or these big topics like inclusivity and diversity, like environmentalism. They will not, they are for everyone, these topics. Everybody, every company will have to respond to those in order to remain relevant. So how can you break those big topics down? And what exactly is shifting for your audience? And last but not least, get clarity on not just on what is happening, but when. It comes back to that pyramid at the start, the mavens, the early adopters. Where does your audience sit? Have you got a percentage of mavens, but a huge percentage of late majority? So when is this change going to impact them? Because that's absolutely critical to you being able to get your products in front of them at the correct time. Last but not least, in lockdown last year, we spent a lot of time launching a brand new online platform, and we can provide free membership for that. We've got like a free membership level for that, which you are more than welcome to go to. We've got a free membership there today for the attendees. So if you go to my.trendbible.com/register, and if you just quote Rise and Design when you're requested to, you'll be able to get into that platform today and have a look around. And that is the first top tip that I gave you, was make sure you know what's happening. Make sure you're doing some future thinking, absorb some information about the future and what your consumer will do, and hopefully that will provide you with some interesting material to have a think over. But thank you so much for listening. Terry, I guess back to you if we've had any questions.
Thanks for that, Joanna. That was fabulous. I'll just put us on gallery view first, so that we can all show our appreciation in the now usual manner with a bit of jazz hands. So thanks for that, Joanna. That was brilliant, and particularly that bit at the end. So if you do nothing after today, then get yourself along to the website and use that to get some amazing insights as to what might be coming along. So we've now got a few people who want to ask. Actually, I'll just put Joanna, and I'll just find David Both. Can you give me a quick wave, David? Where are you?
I'm here.
There we are.
Over here in the corner, no doubt.
So you had a question for Joanna.
Yeah, Joanna, hello. I just wanted to ask you whether you do any technology trend forecasting, because I think the new products and services of today and tomorrow will come from that intersection between the consumer trends that you have been describing to us, but also what's happening on the technology front to enable new products and services. And it's where those two intersect, I think, where, you know, the products and services of the next few years will come from. Do you do any work on the technology side?
Hi, David. Yes, we do. And I guess it comes back to that sort of the pastel model, I guess. So, you know, politics, economics, forgotten all the rest, but technology's in there. So it's an important strand and thread to be able to sort of predict life at home or consumer life in any way. It absolutely has to come down to understanding the relationship that consumers will have with technology. So we do a lot of research into technology. And I mean, the last sort of couple of weeks, whilst you'll all have been following how Facebook has sort of rebranded and set out their stall actually about a year ago about this idea of the metaverse and how important that was going to be to the future of them as a business. And we've been following that for quite a long time, because it comes from the world of gaming, and we work with lots of companies who work in gaming. And for years, people have been saying the future of so much, you know, the future of healthcare is actually, if you look at the way that gaming performs as an industry at the minute, you can predict the future of how healthcare will go. Now, in the past, you would never put those two industries together, but this idea of sort of gamification and the type of interactions people can have in gaming now is just phenomenal. And I mean, we've just looked at some research this week that suggests that Gen Z value their screen time more than in-person interactions. I think it's something like 60% of that generation value their online experiences more than real life. Now, to people like me, that makes my heart drop a little bit, because I'm of a different generation and I have a lot of life experience outside, you know, aside from my relationship with technology, which is fairly recent compared to Gen Z, who have grown up completely embedded in this world of technology. So how interesting to think that kind of doesn't matter to them whether it's in person or not. That's not the question anymore. We can't waste our time saying, why don't they care more about real life? Because they just don't. We have to figure out ways to be able to engage with them when they are going to be living in the metaverse. And it's really fascinating. It's such a big thing. I nearly presented my second trend today instead of the age of emotion on this idea of the sort of metaverse, but it's so big that I just can't do it justice in the time that we've got allowed. But technology is massive. We should all be looking at it for sure.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thanks, Joanna. Has anyone else got a? Because I know, Judy, your ears pricked up at the mention of the emotional intelligence thing.
And I'd kind of love to talk, but my carpet fitters are getting closer to this room. So I'm kind of struggling. Joanna, I do need to definitely talk to you about this, because as a qualified emotional intelligence coach, this is just so relevant. It just blew my mind away when you said that was a trend for 2023. So I've recognized this for so long within businesses. One of the reasons that they struggle to survive, they develop new products, etc., is because they don't communicate well. They don't know how to empathize. They struggle with stress. They struggle with decision making. So when I knew I was dealing, I knew about this a long time ago, but I didn't know what the umbrella term was. And then I discovered emotional intelligence and trained as a coach. So I love it. Absolutely love it. It's really, as Terry said, it really did spark interest with me completely.
Good, that's good. I must say we thought long and hard about that title. When we create these trends, we gather a lot of information together, and then we have to label it in a way that's going to give us a platform to catch people's attention, as you do with any title of a blog post or anything. But when we sat down to look at all of it, we had an abundance of building research for this, and it just built and built. And we felt that we had to call it the age of emotion, because it completely, that's what it is. That is the next thing that is coming. As much as we might say that the metaverse is the next thing that's coming as well. I know these two things might seem quite separate, but the age of emotion, it's a grand label, but it needs to be, because we have to understand how significant this is going to be for consumers. The way that they feel and the way that they will be able to control the way they want to feel is massive. And we're already seeing lots of sort of, from medication, healthcare, technology, apps that will help you shape the way that you want to feel. It's huge. So I think it's really positive and exciting, and enhances, I think, uses technology to enhance the human experience, which is a wonderful thing.
Thanks, Julie. David, you had a question. If you give me a wave. Oh, there we are. I found you. It's all right.
I'll just unmute myself. Thank you, Joanne. That was really interesting. Just a very quick question about, it probably isn't a quick answer, but in terms of how you research sort of future trends, what percentage do you do that's online, and what percentage do you do that's in the physical space? Because you mentioned that you had agents overseas, and I would have thought that was because there is an element of physicality to how you gather the data as well. So I'm just quite interested in terms of knowing the ratio of that gathering.
Yes, so that makes sense to me. What I would say is that we don't conduct market research. We don't go and ask consumers what life is like now, because when we are dealing with foresight, not insight, it's of no use to us, or very little use to us. So we will look at other people's market research. We'll sometimes buy in data if we feel that we've got a particular piece of foresight we want to bolster, but that's the way we do it. We create the foresight, and then we'll underpin it with the data. We don't look at the data and then decide what it tells us. And that's the way that we choose to forecast trends. Otherwise, we would be tracking trends and trend spotting, which is a valid process. You can trend spot, find trends that are there. I've done a bit of that today in the presentation. I've shown you some examples of some brands that exist. That's kind of trend spotting. But in order to create a true hypothesis and a number of scenarios that may come true, the practice foresight, not insight. So we have researchers all over the world. They are trend forecasting researchers. So they practice forecasting. So they will tell us, these are the type of things that we've seen happening in Shanghai. These are the behaviors that we think are potential white space opportunities. And then we'll work together as a group to say, well, what does that mean? What will now happen? How can we map out the journeys that are now going to exist? And there might be 6 or 8 or 12 scenarios that unfold from that. But that's why we have people all over the world, because, say, for example, we had recently done a piece of work for a brand that was interested in this sort of toxic masculinity concept, and they wanted us to be able to talk about that. When we dropped that whole concept into the Chinese market, then into the Norwegian market, we found that it went like that, which probably is no surprise to anybody here. But the idea of toxic masculinity it's not an appropriate phrase. It's not reflective of the type of way that men are choosing to live their lives in China. In fact, there is a sort of big movement in China to send boys to schools to make them more masculine at the moment. Whereas if you go into the Norwegian market, you will find that there is less segregation and more activity for children around making sure that boys and girls spend time together and making sure that there's a more sort of inclusive togetherness. So that's why we have those international scouts, because we are working with global brands, but they have to understand the nuances of when you say this trend is happening at different paces for different consumers. There might be some shared mindsets there, but it's happening once you put it into those cultural areas. There are lenses that only people in those geographies would see. I wouldn't be able to see that from my desk in Newcastle to say, oh, I think this is going to happen in China. So we work with those trend scouts to make sure we've got a lens on it for them.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah, that's good. That's great. Thank you. Yeah.
Thanks, David. And then there was a quick question from Jamie, who's just, well, no, there he is. Sorry,
Hi there.
He just moved.
Yes, so John, I was just asked a question about who is jumping on these trains and where, because I was talking to a Danish design agency just last week who were working with a tech company in Israel for a US marketing product around grief and empathy. So I was just quite interested and quite curious from your point of view as a specialist in, you know, in trend, as to, were there, I guess, are there hotspots where these things are happening, or is the fact that pandemic has allowed lots of different interesting like-minded companies to come together to work on interesting ideas for various consumers?
That's a really good question. And I think the pandemic accelerated it, but it had already happened. So when I used to show that pyramid of influence slide, the Mavens, I used to actually have a list of hotspots in which change generally came from, places like Stockholm or London or New York or Amsterdam. And actually about 5 years ago, we took that out, because what we realized was that you could become, you know, a chart-topping pop star by making a record in your bedroom. You didn't have to have a record contract. You know, all these, you know, life was just teaching us that innovation could come from anywhere. It could come from a bedroom on a back street in Gateshead as much as it can come from the centre of New York City. So in that respect, sort of innovation's been democratized, and it makes life much more interesting for us as trend forecasters, because we're not kind of just looking to the same old people live in the same old cities. And it's one of the why we do so well being based in Newcastle and not based in Amsterdam, New York and London. I used to worry about the fact that we weren't based there, but now I feel like it gives us an even better perspective to say, well, if we can see stuff happening in these different places, it doesn't necessarily mean to say it's happening everywhere. We've got a model that we call from Shoreditch to Shields Road. And for those of you that are sort of northeasterners, you might know Shields Road. It's the second most deprived high street in the UK, actually, and it's about 1 mile from my office in the Ousburn. And we always talk about the fact that a trend might well start in Shoreditch, in one of the coolest parts of London, although Shoreditch is not the coolest place in London anymore, but it was when we created this model. And you know, this idea that a trend can go from Shoreditch to Shields Road, that's the journey that a trend will take. It will become relevant for different groups of consumers over time. And we use that model just as a quick reference to make sure that we're thinking about where in the world this change is happening. But I love the idea. I'd love to hear more about that project that you referenced. It sounds like a wonderful collaboration.
Thank you. Yes, I'm sure I can tell you a little bit more, but I can catch up later.
What I'll do with all the speakers you'll hear today, I'll share their contact details when you get some information on Monday, and I'm sure they'd love to hear from you if you've got some interesting stories to tell. So Joanna, thanks for that again. And having been described as a maven by yourself, well, then if anyone argues, I'll tell them where to go. So, but again, thanks for that. It was fabulous, and have a wonderful birthday weekend as well. So I'm now delighted to welcome James from Tommy Tippy, who is, sorry, I'm just frantically clicking lots of buttons here, who is going to tell us about some of the work that they're doing. I'm just trying to find James right in the spotlight, and there we go. So James, over to you.
Hi Terry, thank you very much. Can everyone see my screen there? Could someone just give me a wave or a nod to say that you can see a presentation?
We can.
Fantastic.
Yes,
that's great. Thank you. So yeah, I'm delighted to be here today to talk to you guys. I've been following Design Network North for quite some time. I'll touch on that in a minute. And I'm really excited to be able to talk to some of you today about what I've seen, what we've learnt, certainly over the last 18 months, but also more generally in terms of packaging, innovation and sustainability as well. Thank you also to Joanna for touching on something that I'm going to be talking a lot more about, which is our sustainability, how it's affected the consumer, but also what we've been trying to do to do a better job as well. I'm going to give you a very quick introduction to myself, to Mayborn and Tommy Tippy. I'm going to touch on our approach to packaging, what we think is important and what we've tried to do more of. I'm going to talk about the journey we've been going on and what's going to continue to be our focus for years to come, which is sustainability and our Brighter Futures campaign. I'm going to talk about a couple of recent projects and case studies that we've launched and learned from. And I'm going to tease a teeny tiny bit of what's going to be coming in the future without giving too much away. So first things first, a little introduction to myself. I'm James Hudson, Creative Packaging Manager at Mayborn Group, Tommy Tippy. You might have noticed I'm not a true Northerner. I made the move to the Northeast about 18 years ago now to study product design at Northumbria University. But like a lot of people, the Northeast is the place for me. It's a place that I love. I was fortunate enough to meet my wife up here, and I've now got a young son up here. So the Northeast is where I intend to stay for quite some time. And my junior board nerd, Kit Hudson, he is as passionate about cardboard as I am. So he's learned an awful lot from me, and I've learned a lot from him as well. So just to give you a very quick summary of my journey over the last 12 years or so in the creative industry. So I studied product design at Northumbria University, and I was lucky enough to find a job working for Cut and Brush not long after graduating. They're a fantastic local company based in Hebburn that do a lot of work with brushware supplies, industrial products, and I was basically there as their product designer for 4.5 years. In that time, we did an awful lot looking at product and also packaging. And I guess this is the thing, a lot of people that work in packaging kind of fall into it at some point in their career because the important part packaging has to play along with the product, which I'll touch on again in a minute. After 4.5 years at Cotton, I made the move from a fairly small company to one of the biggest companies you could possibly work for at P&G. I made the move to their fine fragrance factory at Seaton Delville. And that's really where I learned an awful lot about the important part packaging has to play, not just as a brand piece or as a piece of packaging itself, but how it works through automation process, how it works with suppliers, and how we have to get everything just right to make sure we delight the consumer at the same time. And then about 4.5 years ago, I made another move. I made the move to Mayborn Group in a brand new opportunity for them as their creative packaging manager. And that's been a fantastic opportunity to take a lot of what I've learned in my previous 2 roles, build on it, and also work with our fantastic team to go on a bit of a new journey, which is what we're in the middle of right now. So a little bit about Mayborn Group, the home of Tommy Tippy. We have been in the Northeast for a long, long time. Our home is actually just down the road in Balliol Business Park. That's our global HQ, but we also have a whole wealth of offices all around the world, in America, the Far East, Europe. And we've also got a number of manufacturing facilities set up. We've got one just down in Mansfield, which produces our nappy changing products. We've got another factory in Morocco, and then several facilities over in the Far East, including an office in Hong Kong. We're a truly global company. We have a lot of collaboration every single day to make sure that we do the best job we possibly can. And we've got a great team of really, really experienced people working with us. Just to touch on the consumer, they are at the heart of everything that we do. Every decision we make, every thought that we give on the product, it comes back to them, because our purpose as a company is making sure that we help parents, mums, dads enjoy and embrace that roller coaster ride of bringing up baby. And as the parent of a 2.5-year-old, I can tell you it is a roller coaster journey. But we've done an awful lot to make sure that the consumer is the focus of everything we do, including looking at the trends, the changes that we're seeing, and also what's coming through in the future as well. Now, it's not just one particular product. We've got a whole host of 8 or 9 categories or need states that we touch upon. So you can just see on the wall there a small selection of the products that we were talking about here. It can be bottles, soothers, nappy changing, electrical products, eating and drinking. Anything that your baby or toddler touches is something we've probably had a look at some point. And we've got a vast portfolio which is changing all the time of products that have been designed to help little ones in any way we possibly can. Now, it's not just me. We like I said, we've got a fantastic team that's been on this journey with us. We've got a brilliant creative team who I work very closely with every single day on the artwork, digital and asset side. We've got a new product development team that head up everything that's coming through in the next 12 to 18 months. But I have to speak to so many different people every day from all around the world, including the factories, our procurement teams, our regional teams, making sure that we've got a piece of packaging that works as well as possible with the product in mind, satisfies everyone, including the factories, the stores, and our customers, and wherever possible, we're making the right decisions at the right time to help everyone. And just to explain a bit more about my role, I basically have end-to-end ownership of all things packaging at Mayborn. So everything from the spec of the cardboard we use, to the suppliers we work with, to the die lines that we then apply artwork to, that comes through me. I then pass that on to other people within the business to do their fantastic work with. But if there's ever a query about packaging, it will come through me, and then I pass that on to whoever needs to do something with it afterwards. So just to touch on our approach to packaging, I've shared this slide to quite a few people in the past. These are the key things that I'm often thinking about whenever I think about packaging. These are the things that I consider the most important functions that we have to keep in mind with packaging, because it is an extension of the product. It has to do an awful lot to win over that consumer, whether they're walking down the shop and picking our product over consumers, or simply them taking it home and opening it and it working for the first time. So it's obviously got to contain something. It's got to protect and preserve it. It's got to be convenient, and that's not just for the customer. It's for the factory that have to pack it. It's for the suppliers that have to make it, and it's for the stores that have to stock it, and even down to the recycling or the waste disposal at the end of life. We have to think about all of that to make sure that our pack does everything that we need it to do. It needs to inform and sell, and we've got some fantastic examples of what our brand does to sell the product in the best way possible, providing that brand identity. And the two fairly new ones, or the big challenges that I'm constantly being pushed to do better, is being as cost effective as possible, but also being environmentally responsible, making sure that the materials we use, the processes we work with, are all as sensible and environmentally responsible as possible. Now you'll see I've got an example of an orange peel there for you, and that's for the reason that it is the simplest, purest form of packaging that I can think of. It satisfies every single one of those considerations there, and it's readily available, and it's the cheapest thing you could do. I'm just going to flash this up for you as an example of what some people think could be convenient, that could protect and preserve, but certainly from a cost or an environmental point of view, it's perhaps not the right thing to do. And really, we're trying to avoid that happening at all costs by asking these key questions at the very beginning of a project. We try and work up a pack solution, a pack structure that meets as many, if not all of those criteria at all times. Just a few more examples that make me smile a little bit when things perhaps haven't gone as well. If you don't satisfy those considerations, or you don't at least think about things before you launch a product, it can end up in a bit of a tricky situation. You might end up with a pack that's particularly difficult to open. I've seen examples of a pair of scissors wrapped inside a blister pack that also needs a pair of scissors to open it. You can have unnecessary costs there. So again, the fruit example, you've got something readily available in a skin that keeps it fresh, but some people feel the need to then put it into a plastic bag or a plastic tray. I'd question that, and I'm sure a few of you would as well. Even down to things like tablets, where you've got 2 or 3 layers of packaging. Again, questioning, is that the right way to do things? It takes up excess material. It certainly takes up excess space, and I'm sure it could be a source of frustration for consumers if not done in the right way as well. I'm just going to touch on the holistic approach to packaging, which you try and have at Mayborn. So it's not just a product or a bottle, and it's not just a box or a piece of packaging. The two of them really have to work together, and a big part of my job is working with our product design teams to ask them certain questions, but also understand as much about that product as possible. Because if we work together, we can think about things slightly differently, and we can certainly come up with a packaging approach which might have not been most likely the first time around. So again, as part of my job, I'm working with the product design teams, I'm working with the sourcing teams, and also within our team, just to make sure we at least ask the question all the way through. Is this the right approach? Could we do something better? Could we do something smarter? And I'm going to touch on that in some of the case studies I'm going to share at the end of all this. So sustainability, this is the big E for us. And I'm just going to talk a little bit about what we've seen, what you're going to see coming, and perhaps what we've learned as well. So it's obviously been an interesting 18 months for us all. We've gone through a global pandemic, and there's obviously more of that to come. It's changed how we've had to work. It's also changed how our customers behave. With the high street being shut for periods of time, we've seen a big move towards e-commerce, but also to convenience as well. And also keywords like hygiene, sterilization have all come up as being much more important to consumers than they perhaps were 18 months ago. And the big one that I'm seeing a lot at the moment is the supply chain and freight impact for that. So we now know that shipping a container from the Far East is 10 times more expensive than it was this time last year. And we know that certain materials are a lot more difficult to get hold of for various reasons as well. So again, when we're asking ourselves these questions in a project, a key one is the pack as compact and space efficient as possible? Because it's not just the material cost, it's the freight cost and it's various other aspects that we're now challenging ourselves to do better as a result. So sustainability is the big one for us. We all know what's been going on in the last couple of weeks. It's been such a big talking point. There's been lots going on and we've been aware of this for some time, but I've just got a couple of quotes there from some people that you've probably heard of as well that are all kind of saying the same thing. We all have a part to play in this. Our consumers know this just as much as we do. There's a lot to be done and we've started on that journey, but there is a lot that we can all try and do to work better and be better as a result. Blue Planet is probably the biggest trigger we saw when it first got showed 3 or 4 years ago. I think we all remember seeing the footage of those poor fish turtles trapped in plastic that's floating around in the sea. And some of the research we've seen has seen that it has had a huge influence in consumers being aware of plastics, but also what they perhaps don't want to see as well. And I want to be very careful here. Plastic is a fantastic material. It's got a lot of benefits to it that other materials don't have. Unfortunately, the way it's been shown in the media isn't the best. And I think recycling and processing has come a long way to help with that. But within Mayborn, we've made some decisions that we think are the right things to do with that in mind. But I'm by no means saying that plastic is the worst material in the world. It has certain benefits that you won't find with other materials. So with that in mind, single-use plastics, this is what we're trying to move away from, and this is what you're going to see less and less of from us. So there's lots of different definitions for single-use plastics, depending who you talk to and where you are in the world. But for us, we consider a single-use plastic to be something that is a plastic item designed to be used only once or for a very short period of time before being disposed of. We believe that about 40% of plastics consumed are single-use. Yes, they might be convenient, but they're being discarded after just one use, and who knows where they end up. So with that in mind, you might have seen this already, but we recently launched our campaign for Brighter Futures. This is our new sustainability drive, and the focus being all the work that we've been doing. We want to make sure that the consumer knows about it and knows that we're trying to do the right thing and the reasons why. As a company, we're going on a journey just like everyone else. We're trying to make sure that, thinking again back to our consumers, to mum, dad and baby, that we do the right thing for them. We make sure that we've got a future that's right. And we try and provide the best for them. And that means protecting the planet. It means doing the right thing now to make sure it stays that way tomorrow. We've got a plan. I'd like to share some of that with you today and also tease a bit about what might be coming as well. So as a company, we've made some commitments to protect and preserve these natural resources because we simply can't live without them. And we've made some big claims or some big targets that we're working towards as well. So this is the biggie for me. So by the end of 2022, we want to have completely eliminated single-use plastic packaging from our portfolio. We estimate this is about 450 tons. And there's also further work going on to do with product, where there's going to be further work happening towards the middle of 2025 and beyond. By 2030, we've got some more ambitious goals, which again, we're working towards. We want to be using renewable energy and zero landfill. We'd like to make sure that single-use plastics have been looked at throughout the supply chain, not just packaging or product, distribution, warehousing, everything, and try and make some selective choices there as well. We'd like to be net carbon zero and also make sure that we are sustainably sourcing materials and being as responsible as we possibly can during product development, which again, I'll touch on shortly. We have done a huge amount of work in the last 18 months. I'm delighted to be able to tell you that in 2020, we'd done a lot of work to eliminate over 200 tons of single-use plastic from our packaging. It's not just been me, there's been a whole sustainability team working on this, but we've done a fantastic job, and I'm really delighted with the work that we've done. There's a lot more to be done, certainly at the end of this year and into next year, but it's a fantastic first step on the sustainability journey that we're going on. Working with our factories and working with a couple of external parties, we've done a huge carbon footprint assessment as well. We've tried to make sure that we've mapped everything out to understand the true cost of everything that we're doing. And we've made some big savings and reductions just by thinking a bit smarter, changing some of our processes and our layouts in our factories. And we've already got a plan of what we'd like to do next in the next couple of years to further reduce that. And you'll see a bit more on this in a minute. All of the new product launches that we have, we're trying to be as innovative and sustainable as possible. Again, by asking those important questions at the very beginning, we're trying to make sure that the product, the packaging, and everything that comes with it sells that sustainability story in the right way to mums, dads, and babies. And we're not stopping there. So Brighter Futures is something that you'll be seeing a lot more of on our packaging and also through our website and everything else. It's going to be a key focal point. We'd like to be able to tell the consumers what we've done and why we're trying to do it, because it's great doing this work, but if the consumer doesn't know about it, it could be better, certainly. So I'm just going to touch on a couple of projects that we've had over the last 12 months, explain a bit more about them, and then close up with some key next steps and learnings, what we'd like to do more of as well. So I'll start with what we've done internally as a company. So we launched our new sustainability program probably about 18 months ago. And a big part of that was making sure that everyone knew about it and everyone was engaged with it. That includes all of our factories, that includes our HQ, all of our regional offices as well. We want everyone to be proud to work for Mayborn and to know that all of us are doing the right thing for our planet. We've also collaborated with a number of external groups to help us with things like carbon footprint reviews, packaging selections, and just making sure that we've thought about everything all the way through our process. And then within our own teams, I'm part of the sustainability steering team. We catch up once a month to talk about latest updates, latest trends that might be coming through, and just making sure that we haven't missed anything along the way as well. And then within packaging, we've started a lot of work to get to that point of being single-use plastic free. So very, very shortly afterwards, we asked ourselves some very hard questions and made some decisions that we think are right at this stage. So we've removed PP laminate from all of our cartons, and you'll see that next year and beyond. There's no more plastic films on our packaging, which means that that piece of cardboard can be safely disposed of in the right way. A removal of hot foil has also allowed us to do that as well. And then the big challenge we're going through at the moment is being sustainable with our sourcing, making sure that we pick the right suppliers and we get certain assurances from them that the materials they're using are from a sustainable source. So again, the FSC certification is a big part of what you'll see coming through from us as well, because although cardboard has to be consumed, we'd at least like to try and make sure that it's coming from the right places and it's being managed in the right way. So I've got a couple of nice examples of products that have come out in the last 12 months or so where we've started doing that work. And I'll tell you a bit more about the challenges we had and what we're going to try and do about it as well. So mealtime, that tricky time when little one wants to do all sorts. This is the packaging that we had when I joined the company 4.5 years ago. It was absolutely fine. It did everything we needed it to do. But I think there was a question asked, could we do more to show off the product, to be perhaps a bit more convenient and perhaps communicate a bit better what the product is inside the pack? Because as I said, cardboard is a great material, but so is plastic, and plastic can do certain things that card can't. So at the time, we made this change, and you can see straight away, moving from card to plastic, you could instantly see more of the product. We had a brand new branding to go with it and a brand new color that went with it. And we felt this was the right thing to do at the time because it really allowed us to showcase the product, end up with a pack that did all the right things. That was 2 years ago. We've now made another change and we've tried to do the right thing again while still embracing the benefits of both the two examples that I showed you. We've made the move back to cardboard, but you can see that what we've done is we've tried to take those elements that were still there from the plastic packaging. So you can see a lot more of the product than you could before, but it's now cardboard rather than plastic. We've maintained that fantastic branding to show off what the product is. We're trying to be clearer with our messaging as well. So you'll see these products on shelf now. And I think they do a fantastic job of showing off what these products are while still allowing them to be as sustainable as possible. We built on that further with our cutlery range. So again, 2 years ago, these were in a header card and blister, which did everything that we needed it to do. You could clearly see what the product was. The product was kept safe, but there was an awful lot of plastic material there. This was a challenging one. We had to come up with something that was plastic free, that still showed off the product as much as possible without being too weak or structurally risky. I'm really happy with what we came up with here. So our new range of cutlery is 100% plastic free, but also it does a really nice job of showing off the product, not just from the front, but from the sides. We've been really challenged with what we've had to do here, but the pack structure we've ended up with does a really nice job of keeping all the products in place whilst maximizing visibility of the product. And again, with new branding there to communicate what the product is, we're really happy with how this turned out. And again, it's a lovely success story. That pack is actually 30% smaller than the plastic pack was. So we've got a freight saving in there as well, but we've tried to do it for the right reasons and try to just be smarter with everything that we do. Cups. Now you might have seen a bit on cups already, because just last week we showcased our brand new range of cups. This is where we are and soon to be out of. Our current range of cups, very, very plastic based. We know that plastic has a lot of benefits, and we know that we had a few challenges to overcome. But again, at the time, we felt that plastic was the best material to use. It allows the product to be visible, and on a peg where it's going to get pulled on and off several times, we need to try and make sure that the pack remains neat and tidy at all costs. But I'm really happy to share with you the latest range of cups, which will be out now, if not very shortly. We've got a fantastic new set of cups with some great decor on them, and some improvements have been made there. But equally, the packaging, you can see now, is cardboard rather than plastic. We did an awful lot of work with our testing to make sure that the pack structure was as secure and robust as possible. I can't tell you that it's as strong as plastic, but we've done everything in our efforts to make it as strong as possible, to make it robust, but still show off the product as much as possible. We're really happy with how this has turned out. And this has actually saved something in the region of 40 tons of plastic each year for making this change, which I'm really, really happy with. I'm going to touch on change time now. As Joanna talked about, change time and nappies is a bit of a tricky area, but we've tried to do work here to be smarter with the products and the packaging that we use for those very reasons. I'll start with talking about the nappy bin itself. So when I joined the company, we were working on a new design of nappy bin. We wanted to make sure that the product, but also the packaging, were as thought about as possible, and made some key decisions in line with all of that. So by working with the product team, we were able to do a few things to smarten things up. So we asked ourselves a few questions. Could you reduce the size of your pack by putting the lid inside the tub, for instance? And we could. We ended up with a larger tub in a smaller pack. So we're really happy with how that turned out, because again, by working with the product teams, we ended up with something that wasn't a huge change. It was just a bit of a rethink in how we pack things and how we store things. And we did some more questions when it came to kits. The tub itself is a piece of packaging. There's a huge amount of space inside it. Why not fill it with something? So when we've got a tub with 12 cassettes, why not fill your tub with 6 of those cassettes? Suddenly your box only needs to be half the size, and suddenly you've got some big savings and some big benefits that come from that as well. And again, by asking those questions early on, when we launched our new tub, we were really happy with what came out at the end of it. We've taken it a stage further in the last 12 months. So the film that we use for our nappy disposal now comes from a sustainable source. We've worked with our Mansfield factory, we've worked with a number of external parties, and we've made some big savings in the carbon footprint as well. So you'll see a lot more green messaging on our packaging. Yes, it's still plastic, and yes, it still has implications, but we're in a much better position than we were 18 months ago. And again, there's still more work that can be done. And taking it one stage further, we asked ourselves some harder questions still. What could we do if we took the cassette away altogether? And that packaging is something like 75% smaller as a result. You can basically have 3 or 6 refills delivered to you, and it will end up through your front door, through the letterbox. It's a really, really convenient piece of packaging. And again, we've tried to reinforce the green messaging that comes with it as well. It's early days. This only launched in the last 6 months, but we have seen some really, really positive and favorable reviews from it. I think we can take a lot of what we've learned here and the journey that we've been on and do a lot more further. And just to touch on e-com, I think like a lot of you, we work closely with the likes of Amazon to make sure that we satisfy their fulfillment requirements as well, which I know is a bit of a minefield when you think about terms like frustration-free packaging and prep-free packaging, but we try to make the right decisions to help them and to be as convenient as possible. So I'll show you a couple of examples of what we've been working on. So again, similar to the change time example, a piece of packaging that could literally fit through your front door. It arrives, you open it up, and you've got your product nicely presented in there. It could be a pack of teats, it could be a pack of soothers or something else. And again, we've asked the question, what is the right quantity for a customer? Do they want just one item? Because I know I hate it when I get an Amazon box through the door that's massively oversized with one small thing inside. We've asked ourselves the questions and tried to make sure that the quantity that we pack inside the box is right and sensibly sized as a result. And there's more work to be done, but we've done a lot here to make sure that we've got a box that works, a spec that works, that satisfies Amazon's requirements, and where possible, try to give it a bit of a premium unboxing as well. Now, I can't touch on this too much, but certainly we've only just started the sustainability journey, and you're going to be seeing a lot more, not just in 2022, but up to 2030 with everything that we do. You'll see lots of changes coming, not just with the products that we use, but also the packaging, the branding, and the messaging that we use. What I can say is Brighter Futures has only just started. You're going to hear about it a lot more, and it's really going to shape everything that we do as a business, certainly not next year, but beyond. So with that in mind, I've just got a couple of points I'd like to end with. So as a trend, sustainability is the #1 concern for us. It's a consideration in everything we do. And selfishly for me, I know that packaging has a major part to play in that, along with our products. What I'd encourage everyone to do is to look for inspiration from others. That's not just people that work in your category or people that work in your industry, but everywhere, because a lot of people are doing the same work now. There's some fantastic materials and some fantastic resources out there that we can all learn from and share from. I'd encourage everyone just to understand the full life cycle of your product and your packaging. Think about the journey that it goes on, not just through the letterbox or from the store, but from the very source, from the very first supplier interaction all the way through distribution to disposal, because there will be something you can do better, or at least ask those questions to do something better again. Consider that holistic approach. So the packaging and the product need to work together. We certainly have made some fantastic learnings and come up with options that we'd never have thought possible if we hadn't asked some of these questions earlier on. And like I said before, the work never stops. There's always more that can be done, and we're asking ourselves and pushing ourselves every single day to do better and to be better as well. So just say thank you very much for your time. I hope that's been useful. I'm really happy to answer any questions that you've got or to catch up with you afterwards.
That was fabulous. Thanks, James. I'm just going to take the spotlight off you so that we can go on gallery view and everyone can again show their appreciation for that presentation, but also for what you're doing in the company, because it's going to benefit all of us. So thanks to you from all of us for that. Does anyone have any questions or any comments, observations from what James has shared or other things? Give me a wave if you do. Hi, Yvonne. I'll just...
Hello, and thanks for that, James. It was really great. I wanted to ask you a question about material supply, because we're living through very choppy waters at the moment, and I wondered if it's giving you any dramas and you're having to do rapid redesigns around the materials you can get.
Hi, Yvonne. Absolutely. So I touched on the supply chain and the challenges that we're seeing. We're all seeing the same thing, that lead times are longer, the material is now scarcer to get hold of. What we try and do is we try and plan for that as much as possible, but also we have a few contingencies there. So if we find that we're struggling to meet our timings, we might have to have a fallback option ready. It might be a backup supplier. It might be a fallback design that we know works that we can turn to, or it might be that we have to make some harder decisions. But I think we're all seeing the same thing. All we can do is try and do the right thing at the right time to minimize that as much as possible.
Thank you.
No problem.
Thanks, Yvonne. I'll just have a look. Is anyone else giving me a wave? Oh, Dan, here we go.
Hi, James. That was fantastic. Really, really good presentation, and it's really good to see a larger corporate doing its bit towards, I guess, the opportunities that are out there for sustainability. Just in terms of having worked at similar or large organisations, there's often a sort of a pull and push effect in terms of the changes that you're making to things and to the bottom line, as it were, in terms of profitability. And I think the stuff that you were doing around changing your packaging for e-com is certainly a really, really good opportunity. Is your business having to almost buy and stock products in the warehouse differently for wholesale and for e-com?
Yeah, thank you, Dan. So e-com is a tricky one, and we've learned a lot in the last 18 months. I think, in all honesty, we could do more on this. But yes, we've had to work a few different ways around this to understand the warehousing requirements, as well as this distribution and what the customer needs as well. We try and be as sensible as possible when it comes to costs. So we try and factor in everything when we're working up packaging. And we also review things afterwards as well. So even after a product's launched, maybe 6 months later, we might identify a few opportunities for value engineering or for streamlining things. So like I said, the work doesn't ever stop. We just perhaps revisit things and try and do things smarter afterwards if we need to.
Yeah, okay, that's great, thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan. I think we'll leave it there if that's okay. So James, again, thank you for that. That was fantastic. I'm sure if anyone wants to know more, I'm sure you'd be delighted to share some of those things. So as I said before, I'll share your contact details when I send some more information out next week.
Sure, thank you.
But thank you for that. Now, before I introduce Michael, we're going to have another bit of networking. So I've shuffled all the rooms around. So now is another opportunity just to meet some amazing people, because the place is full of them, obviously. Again, if you end up in a room on your own, don't worry, I'll keep an eye out, and you might get shuffled around, but we'll see 5 minutes. Right, welcome back, everyone. So I'm now delighted to
there's a first proposal that is cross-functionally agreed.
Michael,
but it is the just call it everything and the kitchen sink proposal.
Just going to turn
so
off.
that's the ideal from a functional
speaking.
Yeah, that doesn't mean that that's the ideal from the car, the package, and the usability. So there's a couple of loops to still go with start out.
It's a fascinating listening, I must admit.
Yeah, it's great to hear half of the conversation, isn't it? Right, so I'm delighted to welcome Michael from Decide, the leading brand agency in the UK. I think I would.
That's very generous, Terry.
Well, it's well deserved. Certainly the oldest, I believe, but I'm not going to say any more because I'll hand over to you.
Great stuff. Thanks, Terry. Hi, everyone. I'm just going to navigate the technical minefield that is screen sharing. So do bear with me 30 seconds or so. You should be able to see a huge Decide logo. Let me know if anyone can't. Good stuff. Well, listen, thank you so much for the opportunity to come and share some thoughts and insight with you this morning. I've spoken myself, as I've decided as a wider business, several times at Rising Design over the years, but it has been a little while, so it's great to be back on the stage, as they say. I thought, against the backdrop of what Joanna and James have so eloquently talked about, that I would just put sort of our lens on responding to consumer trends. And I guess for those of you that know Decide, and for those of you that don't, top line, we're a creative business. We're a brand communications consultancy, but very much a design business, a creative business at our core. We tend to work with large FMCG clients, fast-moving consumer goods, the stuff you'll find in the supermarket, but that extends into wider consumer goods sector or one or two other peripheral territories. And I guess what we do in terms of our service offering can see us looking at anything from actually creating a brand in the first place, redesigning a brand, restaging a brand to make it more relevant and meaningful for the world we live in. But I guess there's certain touch points where our specialism focuses on, and those would either be the packaging side of things. And I guess just to build on what James was talking about, we're firm advocates that a piece of packaging is really real estate for a fast moving consumer goods brand. It's an entity that actually encapsulates not only the brand itself, but the product inside, and research will tell you that consumers see those as one and the same in many respects. So that physical real estate of packaging, but we'll also work with brands to develop that online real estate, their digital home, their website, their kind of associated ecosystem around that. So I'm not going to delve too much into those today in terms of crossing over with what James particularly has talked about, but there is a sort of a unifying battleground of shopper marketing and that I wanted to focus on. And it's the fact that whatever we do, whether we promote or sell or produce, at some point we have to persuade someone to buy it and actually give people the evidence and the ammunition to want to buy it. And that's where shopper marketing comes in. So I thought what I would do is just touch a little bit on that side of things. And I guess building on some of what Joanna spoke about and a little bit of what James said, try to put that into a practical context for all of you. So to that end, I've sort of just broken down my sort of 15, 20 minutes or so into two sections. First of all, just talking a little bit about shopping behavior and retail trends. And I think in the second part, hopefully to kind of wrap up the session, this morning's session nicely. So what does that mean? Whether you work in consumer goods or not, as I say, you always have to persuade someone to buy into your product, your service, your offering. And what can we be doing? How can we be thinking in order to make sure that we are relevant and timely? I've used this slide for about 15 or 16 years now in different guises, but I guess just to put in context, a lot of the products that we work with are what you would call lower involvement purchases. So if any of us were to go and buy a car or a holiday or a television or a new piece of camera equipment, for example, there'd be a lot of kind of consideration that would go into that. And some of the same principles apply, but for most of the time, the products that we work with are on a shelf alongside millions of other products. And it still kind of sobers me to this day when you think that most supermarkets will have something like 20, 30, 40, maybe 50,000 different products on shelf. But in any given year, a family or a household might only buy 100 or 200 of those. So there's a lot of products that people are walking past on the shelf and not really ever engaging with them. And that's an interesting dynamic because it means that in that arena of fast-moving consumer goods, you really have to work hard to stand out, to get that attention, and kind of engage the audiences that you want to engage with. And that's really where a lot of the shopper marketing work that we do comes in. It's really all about understanding the kind of the motivations and triggers. And actually, when it comes to that point of purchase, when someone, a human being, anyone really is purchasing, how do we make that decision to buy an easier one? And we're quite funny as people when it comes to shopping. I think Joanna spoke about it earlier around using the word consumer. And at the end of the day, we're people. But when we're shopping, we can behave quite rationally or quite irrationally, depending on the day, the mood, and a number of variable factors. So what we try to do is look at that through the lens of, how can we better understand how a decision is likely to be made at a given time. And I think just to kind of set the scene as well, all of us here have some degree of vested interest in design and creativity. And for us, we're called Decide. We're interested in decision making, and it's a fact that the decisions we make pretty much define every moment of every day in our lives. And whether we're a retailer, a shopper, a consumer, a buyer, research will also tell you that we're very heavily influenced by the visual communications around us, with the information that we take in from the outside world. Around about 90% of what we take in is from the outside world. Our brains are programmed to process visual information faster and much faster. And that's quite interesting, not only for design in any sector, but particularly within fast-moving consumer goods, because it does really mean that the creativity, the design, the layout, the execution, that kind of shopper journey, if you like, can quite literally be the difference between your brand being noticed and chosen, or perhaps overlooked and ignored. So in the first part, I just wanted to sort of touch on, I've just kind of tried to select 2 or 3 trends in each of a few areas, starting from a society level, and just taking that down into what we see kind of at a shopping behavior level, looking a bit closer at the kind of retail sector and kind of some of the category dynamics. And then, as I said, ending up with a kind of, well, what does this mean for kind of brand activation? Hopefully some of this will collaborate what the themes that have already been coming through this morning, but and for those of you that aren't necessarily working actively in consumer goods, I do hope as well it will give you a kind of just a thought process perhaps to be going through in your own sectors, because I do think some of the underlying principles around how and why we decide to buy into brands or not is relevant. So let's just start with at a consumer level and at a kind of a society level, if you fact. Joanna touched on it earlier, and I just want to really kind of reinforce, wholeheartedly agree with that actually from a top line perspective, people's focus on their purpose and priority in life is perhaps, top of the radar more than ever before. We know ourselves, we've all got greater levels of self-awareness about the world around us, about what's happening. We're better understanding arguably what our rational and emotional needs. And I guess there's that kind of acceptance and perhaps a kindness towards others. And we see this in a lot of the briefs that we get from our clients, a lot of the initiatives we get asked to involved in. What's perhaps gone from being a differentiating factor or a nice to have factor, I think as Joanna said earlier, there is an expectation now. People aren't going to trust you as a business, as a brand, unless they actually see that you have the right kind of ethical mindset, the right kind of sustainable approach to the way you operate, and that you're not just paying lip service to some of these factors. They're really important decision-making factors. Secondly, when we think about the topic of total well-being, we see that kind of focus on that balance between focusing on physical wellness, either home or dietary needs, but on the other hand, that kind of mental well-being and that kind of timeout, that feel-good factor. When I think about projects that we've been involved with over the last 12 or 15 months, I can think of 2 examples, both high-profile confectionery brands. Both have relaunched themselves into market, one 2 or 3 weeks ago. And on one hand, one has particularly taken the route of kind of actually communicating how the product experience allows you to escape and enjoy that moment of kind of calm, that moment of kind of, hedonism throughout a busy day. The other has very much focused on the kind of dietary requirements and actually flexitarian choices that people might be making in terms of how they consume foods. But these are kind of themes that we see coming through consistently in the kind of briefs that we get. And from clients who are investing quite heavily in doing trend forecasting, looking at what's happening in the world, looking at understanding their audience and providing sort of detailed, granular segmentations of who is buying where. The third thing, just to kind of touch on as well, is that role of home and community. And I think, we've all been through a process of kind of feeling like we're reconnecting with loved ones. But I think, that kind of reappraisal of what is meaningful time together has become really important. And certainly in kind of briefs that we look at across everything from appliances sector, where you may have, an increased focus on the role of the kitchen as the hub of the home, and the role of appliances in terms of actually being part of that kind of family meal setting. Or in other sectors where we've seen the kind of ideas that we get asked to develop or the kind of campaign mechanics that we are asked to develop, there's a much greater focus on what might be cause-related marketing or win mechanics, where there is some benefit, not just for yourself in terms of something tangible, but maybe something intangible for someone else. Probably one of the most high-profile examples would be, for the parents in the room, the Pampers UNICEF link-up, which was a few years ago now, but around one pack equaling one vaccine. And that kind of mechanic has kind of set the tone for kind of a number of different entities that come into play. And then sort of just taking things forward and down a level towards sort of shopping behavior. It's a fact that we're living in this era of really super consumerism. And this isn't necessarily a new trend. We've seen, looking at data from government sources and people like the IGD, the Institute for Grocery Distribution, who we kind of subscribe to, this trend towards spending more on domestic grocery products and small indulgences has been prevalent for a number of years and is set to continue. And at the heart of it, you look at it, shopping is very much a leisure pursuit. Again, just contrast that kind of a year ago when we were only allowed out of the house for 1 hour a day during lockdown. How many times did that trip to the supermarket become a slightly more important event than it perhaps has been at other points in your life? But generally, we're a nation, and certainly in a lot of Western cultures, very, very much shopping is a leisure pursuit. And there's that expectation when we enter into store environments of being immersed and entertained, whether that's both online or in store. And the phrase, the experience economy is sometimes talked about. As I mentioned, we work with a lot of products that are at their heart quite functional. But I also think those who are most successful recognize that they are the enablers of something bigger, a mood, a moment, a memory. It's not just about buying that product or service, and how you kind of put that into practice throughout your marketing communications, and particularly what we call shopper marketing is really important. We often kind of at the starting point on is kind of thinking about whatever product or service it is, which of those items on that shopping list on the right hand side are we really kind of buying here? People aren't necessarily just looking for a pizza, they're looking for something to kind of enhance that kind of night in with family watching a movie at a weekend, or it's perhaps football night and they've got their friends coming over. So just thinking about those kind of wider emotional triggers becomes really important. And the third thing I wanted to just touch on this slide was the kind of dynamics around recession. And of course we are, technically have been in a period of recession. But the phenomena that you see during periods of recession is not only one of kind of what you call savvy shopping, that knowledge around where I'm buying sensibly and buying rationally and buying, with a cost-effective mindset. But you also see what's referred to as the lipstick effect, and that's the fact that we all automatically default towards seeking comfort, nostalgia, escapism, and reward in smaller indulgences. And it was based on a study that was done several decades ago that saw that sales of lipstick and beauty products tended to rise, at the point of times of hardship, and became a bit of a good barometer for whether or not the economy was about to head into recession. But you see the same thing around products like chocolate, confectionery, certain of the beauty products. Really quite an important kind of dynamic to bear in mind at the moment as we all kind of come to terms with kind of what represents our rewards for our kind of efforts throughout the day. And then again, just taking things down another level. And I suppose this, when we start and think about some of the clients that we work with and some of the larger retailers, we know that the high street particularly has gone through an incredibly challenging period. But I think one of the things that we see clients and brands consistently wrestling with is just how do we deliver this kind of seamless retail experience? How do we deliver what you might call an omni-channel retail experience? So our customers are hopping naturally between touch points and channels, and we know that we've got every opportunity to kind of capture the sale, to engage with them, to imbue them in our brand whenever we have an opportunity to. But we're seeing the kind of the marketplace really wrestle with what that looks like. You'll know yourself stepping into supermarkets or high street retail that we're seeing these environments becoming more than just about facilitating a transaction. It's more about an experience and actually kind of enabling people to engage and immerse themselves in a brand. And actually, when we look at kind of some of the work that we've done over the last few years, certainly our focus in shopper marketing terms has moved from doing primarily kind of store-based toolkits to actually developing elements that will work through the kind of line in terms of marketing. Fast-moving consumer goods, however, is a really interesting area because whilst we've seen a massive rise in online retail and online sales, it's a reality that for a lot of kind of consumer goods products, the final purchase decision will still be made in a physical store environment. So finding that sweet spot is really quite a challenge for brands. And I guess one thing I wanted to just touch on here as well is the kind of the rise of what you might call direct-to-consumer retailing. Again, for certain businesses, I'm sure some of you on the call today, selling direct to your consumers is just the way things are done. But certainly in the kind of consumer goods arena and other kind of products that we work in and services, that kind of rise of D2C as an important channel has been a really important one. And the motivation for doing that can be really varied. About 5 years ago, we first worked on a D2C campaign, which was really all about getting physical samples into someone's hand. But one of the challenges of running any sort of sampling campaign is that you can hand out coupons, vouchers, etc., but you really have no idea who's using them, and you might know how many are being redeemed, but you've got no opportunities then to kind of continue a relationship. So with the direct to consumer work that we were initially doing, this was all about kind of how can we digitize that sampling process. And with one of the projects, this ultimately went on to become the subscription model for on the brand's website to this day. Elsewhere, D2C can serve other different purposes. It may be that you're thinking of launching another product or another service, and you want to kind of road test it with a ring-fenced ecosystem to try and gather data, gather consumer feedback. But the kind of direct-to-consumer model is going to continue to gather momentum. I kind of touched on this next one, but about enhancing every lifestyles and occasions. But I think, again, never underestimate the fact that actually people are shopping for solutions to overcome problems and overcome barriers, which might be skills, it might be time, it might be dietary requirement, etc. But always remember the kind of the solution that people are looking for. When we think about technology, again, this is a hugely broad area and could probably warrant a talk of its own right. But I just wanted to touch on a couple of examples, of really simple examples, I think, of how the technology is starting to come into play against the backdrop of what we spoke about a couple of moments ago. And no better example, perhaps, than the humble QR code, which has been around for a way length of time, a decade plus. But in its first kind of wave or iteration, didn't really get the traction that it deserved. But a week ago, one of client of ours asked us to pull together a business case for kind of QR codes, because they were split as a board as to whether or not they should invest in using them. And the data is quite astounding, really, because we've all had to go through a learning journey with QR codes over the past 2 years. We've become very familiar with them. We recognize that they are vehicles now for quickly sharing information. They're vehicles for hyperlinking to other parts of a brand system, or for taking you, more importantly, from perhaps a physical touch point to a digital touch point. So one of the ways that we've used QR codes over the last year or so is actually helping develop navigational aids and product selector tools that our clients can use in categories in the supermarket, and customers can quickly scan their phone, identify which product is right for them, and find a solution more quickly. And I think the final point on that slide of just this conscientious consumption, and I think Joanna and James have probably done this justice enough for today, so I won't dwell on it. But actually, within that whole design of anything that you produce as a kind of a shopper marketing toolkit, you have to recognise that the kind of conscientious side of people's shopping behaviour is very much order of the day and top of the radar. So when it comes to brand activation, where we see, I guess, 2 or 3 things that are really prevalent over the last couple of years, there's a far greater awareness of kind of what you need to stand for as a brand and what your purpose has to be in the marketplace. So that focus on what you might call the master brand, what do we kind of stand for in the marketplace? And that's kind of happening in a lot of areas generally, but again, within the kind of consumer goods arena, where it's a crowded marketplace, it's something that you maybe buy often, but sometimes buy on autopilot. Having that kind of standout is becoming really important. We're seeing this alongside a kind of a trend in design towards simplification. If you look around the kind of, look at what brands like Kellogg's, Heinz have done, really kind of simplified all of their communication. It's all about dialing up the master brand and standing out in the category. And where you're able to kind of establish these kind of short codes, whether it's a Cadbury's purple or a Toblerone triangle or a Fortnum & Mason green, that kind of, those codes become synonymous and they become signposts, and they become those kind of triggers that actually guide people to your product in the aisle. And I think depending on what your challenge is, a lot of the time when you're looking at launching either a new product or restaging the brand, your objective will be one of those 3 at the right-hand side there. It'll be either selling more product to more people or more often. So I think being clear on that before you actually start on that journey is really important. And actually giving people more than that, more than just a promise of something, but actually that genuine reason to believe that by investing in your product offering, then that will actually align with their own kind of values as well as their needs. And I won't go into this in too much detail, but again, I think for all just some of the clients that we've worked with and work with in different guises that I've just kind of talked through, all or some of those themes are really, really relevant. You've also got alongside that quite specific category challenges and trends that are going to drive a lot of activation over the next 6 to 12 months. For example, in the kind of snacking arena or kind of certain foods, there's new legislation coming in next year around how you can promote products that may be perceived as being high in fats and sugars and salts. So there's a need there for actually a fundamental rethink on kind of your approach to marketing. You know, we're not saying to anybody that you should be over consuming these products. It is a choice. You're buying into that choice, but to actually understand how to best promote and present and frame the opportunities and the kind of information to consumers has become order of the day. So just in the second part, in the last sort of 5 minutes or so, I wanted to just spend a bit of time just talking about, well, what does that mean when it comes to brand activation? For all of you thinking about your own roles, the products and services that you work with, what are kind of 3, 4, 5 things that we should really be thinking about doing when it comes to actually activating? And the first of those are just put under the banner of know your shoppers. And this might sound like a really obvious thing to say, but I guess it's just to encourage all of you to take time out to kind of really understand who is the person that's buying my product from me. It may not be the person who ultimately consumes it, and that for that reason, that happens a lot in consumer goods arena, which is why we kind of draw that distinction. You take for example a hairdryer. We know statistically that a lot of hairdryer purchases are either driven by what you call a distress purchase. A product has broken down and I need a new one, or it's a gifting related purchase that happens around Christmas, Easter, birthday time. So 2 fundamentally different kind of triggers and motivations there for purchasing the same product, but also likely a different person making that purchase. And I think what we've noticed over the last 2 to 3 years is that actually it's really important to have the mindset that your shopper, the person who's buying, will take many different forms. It can be anyone from a colleague in your business, particularly for a larger business, but equally kind of trade audiences. You know, how do you kind of engage with trade audiences? And we've seen a lot more work happening in this particular area over the last 6 to 12 months to kind of really engage trade audiences in what a new product or a new proposition can bring to the marketplace in order to motivate purchase by people like you or I further down the line who are navigating the store with our shopping basket. The second thing I wanted to touch on was, understanding people's needs, and by that I mean like understanding what are we really selling people. Like I said, is it that pizza because they're hungry, or is it actually a whole moment in their lives when they're gathering, getting family together, spending time with friends, etc.? Are you selling them a drink because they're thirsty, or are you selling them an aspiration, in terms of the taste experience or other kind of items around that? And I guess the encouragement is just to think about what experience do you facilitate in people's daily lives? And hand in hand with that goes just thinking about occasions. We talk a lot within our business, and a lot of our clients do, around occasions and demand moments, and when they kind of happen throughout the working day or the weekend or the evenings. And it's worth bearing in mind that you might not just be selling popcorn, or you might not just be selling a movie. You might be selling that whole occasion, that kind of moment of kind of escapism throughout a day, and actually bringing that into the language and the narrative that you use with your shoppers at that time of purchase can really help with that standout. Thirdly is kind of taking people on a journey, and psychologists will tell you that storytelling helps with what's known as perceptual fluency. It makes things easier for the brain to process, and when things are easier to process, statistically, you tend to like them more, you tend to become more familiar. So thinking about each of those kind of journeys that we've just spoken about, whether it's talking to internal colleagues, or whether it's like a trade audiences, or actually the shoppers and consumers that are engaging with your brand in store environments and retail environments, how do you take them on a journey? How do you explain to the trade that the new news that you're bringing is exciting for their category? James talked about the Brighter Futures initiative before. I'm sure within the Tommy Tippy business in Mayborn, they'll be looking at kind of really taking that to retailers and helping them understand what this can mean for their category and their agenda. And actually spelling out for shoppers as well, how do you make that a win-win? And for us, that kind of, we often talk about finding the sweet spot. There will be a sweet spot where what your brand or your product proposition has to offer will align with what your retailer or your third party is looking to achieve in the marketplace. And that will overlap with a certain attribute or aspiration or need that your shopper has. And this is the starting point for every single shopper brief that we work on. Whenever a client wants to promote something or promote it differently, we always look to try and find what we call that shared equity. Where's that space where all of our priorities and allegiances can come together and help us better understand where our solutions may lie in the grand scheme of things. And just a final thought before I close. I think, we've talked a lot about this morning about change, and even in the breakout groups, we've talked about just how much of a maelstrom the last 18 months have been for all of us, and how there have been both positives and negatives on both professional and personal level. I think it's really easy at the moment to focus on change for negative reasons. And I guess one reassurance is that we work with a number of universities, and we have a number of psychologists, and one of the things that they will consistently say to us is that you have to remember that from an evolutionary psychology perspective, certain things haven't fundamentally changed. The marketing task, the brand communications task, still really has three fundamental objectives. It's to get the attention of your audience by standing out, by disrupting, by being salient. It's to engage them, and that ultimately boils down to being relevant or meaning something to them in a particular moment. And then it has to convert, and that's about persuading. It's about turning that interest into action. And I suppose with that mindset, I would hope that all of you would feel reassured that the activities that you do can and will be successful. So thanks for listening. I'm really conscious of time, so I've gone through that a little bit of pace. And I think, like Joanna said, there's probably a wide variety of topics that we'd love to have covered in more detail, but happy to answer any questions.
That's brilliant. Thanks for that, Michael. I'll just put us all on gallery view so we can all say thank you for that. Does anyone have any? We have a little bit of time for one or two questions. So if anyone has anything they'd like to ask Michael, just give us a wave. See, there we go, Yvonne.
Well, thanks very much. I was waiting to see if anybody else would go first, because mine's a bit more of a geeky question. Michael, thank you very much. You won't remember, but we were involved in funding, believe it, a while ago. And I was curious really about your business journey, what's been happening the last few years. You were really good at telling us what the consumers are doing, but what about you guys?
I mean, the business journey has been a really interesting one. But you'll know, I think Terry alluded to at the start, the business is 68 years old. So we're the longest established independent creative consultancy in the UK. I think around about 10 or 15 years ago, our approach fundamentally changed. A lot of the work that we did, you would possibly put it into the category of kind of executional creative. And we made a decision about 15 years ago that we wanted to move to a more strategic position in the marketplace. So that journey that we've been on over the last 10 or 15 years has seen us collaborate with academia, working on a number of different research projects. There's been a lot of upskilling within the team, myself included. I took my own master's at Durham Business School, and then kind of went on to become a chartered marketer. And that's been a story for kind of significant members of the team. From a trading perspective, though, we always, our heartland has always been fast moving consumer goods, and it's always been working on those kind of through the battleground touch points, as I said, of kind of online, in-store, on-pack. So we've really focused on that. Our client split, if you like, we prefer to work in sectors where there's a slightly preferences tends to be more important than price when it comes to the decision-making process, just because we believe that design then has a greater chance of actually influencing, guiding, steering, or informing that decision-making process. So we very much focused on 7 or 8 key sectors over the last 5 years, particularly, and we're active in all of those pretty much, apart from one where we have a toehold in but haven't quite got there, and that's obviously on the list to do. In terms of more recent history, I have to say the last 2 years have been broadly positive. Like any business, we were, I guess, worried about what the future holds. We know that fast-moving consumer goods is a relatively recession-resistant sector. So we kind of doubled down on our business development efforts. For a lot of our clients, they are longer-term relationships, but we have been fortunate enough to secure new roster listings over the last 18 months where we have opportunities to meet new people, work on new brands, develop new relationships. But we've really kind of doubled down on that kind of more strategic side of what we do. So let's work with you to understand the problem. Sometimes the brief that comes through doesn't ask for the solution that it actually needs. It's about understanding what the real problem is, and again, that investment in understanding decision making. But touch wood, we've had a very, very, very solid couple of years, and actually looking ahead, I was saying in one of the breakout groups there, for some of our clients, that they've been shifting products without even needing to promote them for the last year or so. And so the challenge now is actually removing that kind of, external influence, if you like, of pandemic. How do you kind of keep that momentum going? So a lot of the initiatives that I kind of touched on initially very quickly around, can we start and engage people more in the online space? Can we introduce direct to consumer? How can we start and develop more meaningful relationships with the people that buy our brands? How do we make sure that people who buy our consumer goods at the moment, no brand makes money when someone buys one pack or one bottle. You need that consistent rate of sale. So how do we make sure that's a meaningful relationship that can invest in and lead to other things? And I think looking forward into next year, we're really optimistic about our growth in terms of where we head. And obviously looking, we often work in the marketing mix alongside 5 or 6 other agencies, including perhaps the trend forecasting consultancy like Joanna's, Trend Bible, media planning, PR, etc. It's really interesting times for consumer goods brands, but ultimately, like I said at the start, you have to persuade someone to put it in their basket. So you have to have certain touch points working really hard and really effectively. And I think where we've seen, even with huge brands, pushing kind of really kind of compelling campaigns out there, without putting that little shopper lens on things and actually talking to people in those moments that matter most, that perhaps doesn't lead to the success rates that you hope for. So sorry, long-winded answer, but hopefully that does give you a plotted history.
So basically it's going well.
That's right.
Thanks, Yvonne. And thanks, Michael. We'll leave it there because we are running slightly short of time. But again, Michael, thank you very much. That was fabulous. Thank you to all of our speakers, to James and Joanna. We've now got a couple of people who just very quickly want to tell us a little bit about who they are and what they do. So is Ronis still here? I'm pretty sure he is. I'm just frantically looking.
I am indeed.
Hi, Ronis, nice to see you.
You too, it's been a while. So hi everyone, my name is Ronis. I own a industrial product design consultancy. So I help various companies, from individual inventors to established SMEs who are trying to develop and create new products and bring them to manufacture. I focus specifically on UK manufacturing services, so I can help those customers basically bring those products into production. So I actually do that on their behalf for them. So I'm looking to create relationships with potential customers, with people that are actually in the manufacturing sectors, and also interested in anyone who's dealing with app development and electronic hardware and software development, just to broaden my network and hopefully help each other out. So thank you for listening. I'm not great at this, I'm great at design. So yeah, thank you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Ronis. And as with the speakers, I'll be sharing the contact details of everyone who does a little pitch. So I'm sure they'd love to hear from you if you're interested in what they've talked about. So Charlotte, are you wanting to just tell us a little bit about
yeah, stuff? Disclaimer as well, I'm not very good at this, so I'm a little nervous. But as a quick overview, I work in research and innovation services at Durham University. My role is primarily to help connect our social science researchers with businesses and other organisations to help those organisations to innovate and increase productivity. So I'm here today to kind of spread the word, learn about some of the local businesses in the area. And yeah, if anyone's looking to connect with Durham University, whether it is social science research or other aspects of the university, please feel free to get in touch and I'll do my best to help you.
Fab. Thanks, Charlotte. Yvonne.
Hello, yes. Thank you very much, Terry. Appreciate that. I'm here to solve problems. I'm here to solve problems that involve money. So if at some point in the last few months, your business has found themselves saying, well, I'd love to do that if only, and the if only question was to do with access to finance with people to help solve those problems. We do it all day long for lots of businesses. Decide are one of our alumni. We're very pleased to back them. We do the new recovery loan schemes. If anyone is interested in chat about those, they are running till June of next year. And the British government is standing behind these loans, and it gives businesses the opportunity to access cash at slightly discounted rate and on other favourable terms. So we're very keen to speak to people about that. And please reach out to me. We love talking to businesses who are trying to do something, be it move premises, increase their customer base. It could be all sorts of things. You'd be absolutely amazed the stuff that people come to see us about. And finally, I'm going to tell you very quickly about a business called Gap Ice, who we recently funded. They are the UK's most advanced fridge recycling plant, and they're in Felling, and they do 11,000 fridges a week. Please have a little look on our nel.co.uk website and check out the story. You would be absolutely amazed by what this business does. And we do everything from really very tiny businesses up to giant fridge recycling plants. So do reach out to us. We'd love to talk to you.
Brilliant. Thanks, Yvonne. And then Matt, I wanted to say a few words about.
Hi, Terry.
What he does.
Good to see everyone today. Really fascinating session there. I just wanted. My name's Matt Lazenby, and I'm founder of Lazenby Brown. We're a brand design agency. Been going 16 years, so I've still got a way to catch up with Michael and decide. But something we've experienced throughout our careers is the quality and lack of quality in the brief stage of design projects, and the lack of attention and support as to whose job is that to get the brief right, whether that's depth in the brief or it's the strategy that sits within it. There's a lot of question marks over whose responsibility is it to provide the brief, and how do we make it really, really good. So we've put our experience behind a project called Brand Personality. And we're now actively looking for anyone who's looking. We're actively looking to talk to creative directors, designers, people who have set up their own creative businesses, who want to help their clients produce really great briefs, which get to the heart of who that business is, what the personality of that business is, and we do that using a language which really transcends design and gets away from personal taste, so that personal taste doesn't drive the design process. So I've put a link in the chat. It's called the new service is called brandpersonality.co.uk. Easy to remember. So anyone who knows any design agencies or people who are just wanting to define as a business who they really are and communicate that with their creative partners, please do get in touch. So thanks a lot.
Brilliant. Thanks, Matt. And I'm hoping you for our event in January, you might be able to join us and share some of that stuff. Is that
yeah? We've got some great case studies with how we've used this process, both in our own business, but now how other companies are using it, both marketing companies and also other design companies. So it'd be great to share that with you all.
Great, thanks for that, Matt.
Thanks a lot.
Right, so very quickly now, because it's gone past lunchtime, isn't it? So I'm just going to quickly mention a couple of things that are coming up. So I mean, that's what we've been here for today, because of that. So we do this every month. Sorry, I've got too many windows open on my screen here. We do this every month. So this is where you've been for the last few hours. In December, on the 10th, we have our Pecha Kucha session, which, if you haven't heard of that before, it's brilliant. You basically get so anyone can present. We have probably about 15 slots. You get 20 slides, but the slides advance every 20 seconds. So you basically have to keep up with your slides, which is quite a novel experience. So it's a really just an opportunity for you to share who you are, what you do, what your business is about, or it doesn't have to be business related. You can share some other things as well. So that's what we've got in December. And then in January next year, which feels really weird to be talking about January, but it is looming. As I mentioned with Matt, we're going to be looking at new approaches to branding. And I've got a big crossed fingers emoji there because hopefully it'll be a live event, well, a hybrid event, as opposed to one that's just online, but who knows what will happen in January. There's more details of all of those things on the website, as well as a news page and other things on there. So please do pay a visit if you haven't been there before. That's the link, designnetworknorth.org. I'm just going to mention 2 events that we've got coming up. So Design Network North is managed and run by RTC, and they run a whole host of programs to support businesses across the North. So we have something coming up on the 2nd of December, a pitching showcase. So we've got half a dozen businesses who are going to be pitching to investors, but they've gone through quite a rigorous coaching process to get them to that stage. So if you want to come along, it's not just you come along and watch someone else do it, but you might, it might be a good opportunity to learn something about what a good pitch looks like. That's free to attend online, as I say, on the 2nd of December. And then we've got something coming up on later this month with Jenny Smith, who I'm sure some of you know, who is an expert networker. So she's doing a networking boot camp. I think it's only for County Durham businesses, and it's actually over 3 days on 17th, 18th, and 19th of November. But she is a genuine expert in how to get the most out of networking. So if that's something you might be interested in, I'll send some information out on that probably on Monday. But if you're really desperate, drop me a line, I can give you more information. And then the last thing I'll mention is that our Design Means Business conference, which we ran a few years ago, over 4 or 5 years, which actually Michael presented at. I think Joanna did as well, actually. But we had some amazing speakers coming along to the Sage and to the Northern Design Centre to share some real insights into design in business. So we had designers from Aston Martin, from Nokia, from Orange, from Microsoft, from some of the leading brands in the world. So if you want to, if you've got a free hour or so over the weekend or whenever, you just log on there and you can watch one of those videos. Highly recommended. And that's it from me. So it's been lovely to see you. I hope you've all had a good morning. Hope you have a great weekend. And I'll hopefully see you again in December. All of the things that Joanna shared and the other things that other people have shared are in the chat. So have a quick look at that before you log off. And I'll see you again soon.